Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm kind of the host, but not really today, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and I am joined by co-author and dear friend, Alex Gardner. Hey, Alex.
Hey, Emmy.
It's been a second since you've been on the podcast. I think episode 110, and now we're on 140.
I know. I felt like I was a special guest in the background when you were doing the audiobook preview, which was really fun. But I'm happy to be back.
You know, it was really fun reading that, actually. I loved reading the audiobook.
Well, good thing we're going to record it someday.
I can't wait. Hey, Alex, tell the listeners, what book are we talking about?
So we're talking about The Business of Choir, a choral leader's guide to organizational growth. And it's a resource for choir directors who are looking to take that extra next step for their choir. And that is published through GIA Publications, and it will be an audiobook soon.
Yeah, soon. You can find out more at businessofchoir.com. Alex made us a fantastic website. But what I love about it, like right now I'm planning on my syllabi for spring classes. And when we wrote the book, one of the things I wanted was to have it in 3 distinct sections so I could use it in the 3 methods classes that I teach: Introduction to Music Ed, elementary methods, and secondary methods. So when I say secondary methods, my orchestra and band students are also learning how to communicate value, how to build organizational awareness. And I love it when we get to the end and they've student taught and they come back and they say, wow, there is so much more than just teaching that we do in the classroom. And I think that's what this book covers.
It's exactly what that book is covering. And it's a great resource to supplement all the wonderful things we learn in our music ed programs. But there's just some elements that are hard to fit into those curriculums. And so that's where the book can step in.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a funny story that happened right before Christmas. So in church choir, I sit in front of 2 retired professors. One is a professor emeritus of philosophy, and the other one is of art history. They are hilarious. They are so brilliant. And they think I'm like the craziest person on the planet. I don't know why. So we're in choir rehearsal one day before it got started. And one of them is like, so what are you doing these days? And I'm like, hey, I wrote a book. And he's like, about what? And I'm like, Business of Choir. And I start talking. So it was a funny conversation. I come back the next week and one of them goes, well, don't tell me things you don't want me to go dig into. I found the website for your book. And I'm like, isn't it awesome? And he said, man, they publish just about anything for choir people.
Oh my gosh.
But I know he meant it in like a positive way because we have so many great resources out there. Yes. And it's just so fun to see because they don't have that many resources in their world. And we're such personable people. It just made me smile and be so thankful that I'm in the choir music education world. And I've been dying to tell you that story. Plus, I figure the listeners might get a kick out of it too.
I love it. I love it. And can't wait we're presenting next week at the Florida Music Education Association.
Yes, FMEA. Can't wait to go to Tampa.
Yeah, I think we're going to have plenty of stories from that as well. So
it'll be super fun. If you guys are in Tampa next week, make sure you look us up. This episode will publish the Tuesday of FMEA. So if you are listening to this and you're going to be at FMEA, you better come find us and talk to us.
Hang out with us.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And how do you find us? It's super easy. There's a contact page on Business of Choir. And then you can also find me at emilyburch.org/contact. Tons of awesome things in there. So I think that's enough housekeeping.
I think so. Do you want to get started, Emmy?
Yeah, let's get started. We're flipping the switch. So, Alex, you're interviewing me today. I'm a little bit excited and nervous.
Oh, it's going to be fine. But I want to do my own little intro because I usually just get to do like the little guest.
Oh, no.
Hey, Emmy, thanks for having me. I mean,
okay.
You ready? You ready?
Yeah,
is everybody
I think
ready?
I'm ready.
Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast, where we are turning the tables today on our host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch. I am your co-host of the most, Alex Gardner.
You're doing great.
And I don't know if you all saw, if you follow Emmy on her social media, which she posts so infrequently, that she did something super, super cool that her local news station picked up. And we're going to talk about that today. But before we get into that, Emmy, you are the guest on your own podcast. So, of course, we have to ask you the questions. What's your name? Where do you live? What do you do? and what matters to you today?
You speak so eloquently. Very nice. Okay. Emily Williams Burch, but all my friends call me Emmy. I live in Savannah, Georgia, although it's confusing because I work in South Carolina, but I live in Savannah, Georgia. What do? I am a coordinator of music ed, professor of music classes, director of a community choir, and podcast host, among a lot of other non-music related things. And I'm really excited that you're asking questions about this video clip that the news captured because it's sometimes so hard to talk about it. But I'm so excited about this project. And when the news picked it up, they ended up airing it in town, I think 5 or 6 different times. And they aired it one Sunday morning. And it was so cool to have so many people at church come up and say, "I saw you on the news this morning. I have no idea that's what you do." And so then you reached out and said, "Hey, we need to talk about this more." But I don't know how to. So thank you for asking me questions and letting me talk about this.
Absolutely. So the thing that we're talking about is called Hope Arbor. So, Emmy, tell us what is Hope Arbor?
Hope Arbor is a community respite program in Savannah, Georgia. They are an organization that is a 501c3, and it's put together by one of our local Methodist churches. And it offers kind of like an adult daycare setup. It's not very like kosher to say those words, but it allows caregivers who have 100% care of someone with Parkinson's or memory loss or something else going on to drop off their person from 10 to 2 Tuesday, Wednesdays, or Thursdays, and that allows the caregiver to get some time to go get things done. It's a place where these people with different situations then get all this really awesome socialization and activities, and it's really cool. And I think what sparked my interest when I heard about Hope Arbor was something that Dr. Alessandro used to do at Florida State when I was a master's student. We had this program called the Intergenerational Rock Choir. And as a master's student, it was my job to coordinate undergrads going, but we would go to assisted living communities and do singing, where everyone would be sitting in their chairs and we'd be intentionally moving and doing really intentional things. But we would have the residents bring their grandchildren, their children, their friends. So it became this intergenerational thing. And so when I was contacted by Hope Arbor, "Hey, can you do anything musical for our people?" Immediately I went to Intergenerational Rock Choir. And
That's so
it's
fun.
not exactly what it is, but it's kind of where the spark was ignited back in the day.
Well, that's super cool. So you alluded to it a little bit. So exactly what are you doing while you are there? What activities are you engaging in?
So really similar to a choral rehearsal, I structure in the same type of way. There's some type of focus activity, a warm up, something that they're working on, and then a cool down and wrap up. So for people with different types of I'm talking about learning, with people with memory loss and different types of Parkinson's and movement disabilities, we want to get them exploring like things like breathing better, because as you age, there's some calcification of the cartilage between your rib cage, and so it's just physically harder to take really deep and big breaths. There's also just a lot of research into your golden years, and you can be sparked by memories of sounds from prior years. So people who wouldn't talk all day will do songs from the 50s and 60s and all of a sudden spark a question, and they will just go into a story.
Oh,
And
that's
so
amazing.
it's a combination of moving and breathing and conversing and prompting. I'll tell you my favorite story. It was an early one. So I love to do things where they're doing different types of breathing activities, just like we would do in choir. Or when they be like, they might tap their toes or tap their hands back and forth on their knees, different types of things like that. And then I asked where they first heard this song, and we were doing it to Take Five.
Yeah.
So I asked, "Where did you first hear this song?" And this one resident piped up and she was like, "Oh, I remember. I was at this jazz club in this one city, and I was dating a guy named Mike. And I don't remember if it's the Mike that I just dated or the Mike that I married, but I was dating a Mike and we were in a jazz club." And I've never laughed. So it was so much fun. And it sparked great conversations across the room of going out on dates, who was allowed to date, who wasn't allowed to date. And it's just so fun to watch them come alive with stories and memories. Same thing happened right at the end of the semester. We did a breathing and movement activity to Auld Lang Syne, but I used a video clip that had pictures from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in New York. And they were oohing and eyeing. And at the end, I said, what was your favorite part? And one person said they remember wearing dresses like that.
Oh.
Or another person, I remember being there. I went to New York in this year, and just hearing them tell stories. So what we do is we get them breathing and moving and conversing. And one more story. Sorry, I get really excited about them.
They're great.
It's so fun to meet their caregivers. A lot of times the caregivers will come and be a part of music time. It's only about 30 minutes. And so sometimes especially if the person got in the car and was really chatty about something, the caregiver will come the next week. And they've shared a lot about how they see a difference in the conversations after their time when they've had music to spark these memories. It's just one of the most impactful things I've ever been a part of. And I'm eternally thankful that Hope Arbor has opened the door for Rise Outreach to come in. And it's something that I just cannot stop talking about, because for me as directors, we know the power of music, and that's why we spend so much time directing our choirs. But to see that at a different life phase, then impacting so many people in the bubble, I get really passionate about it. Sorry to talk so long.
No, I'm passionate about this too. I have a little experience working in choral spaces with memory loss. And you've encapsulated the power that music has, especially for that population. Just the life that it can breathe back into them. That's a very stigmatized population. And so music has a great way to build connections and sort of break down those barriers, especially amongst caregivers too, because that's a hard job. It's a really hard job. And it can get really weighty. But those moments of connection, of life, vibrancy, music has just a great way of bringing those out. You alluded to what this collaboration is sort of housed under in your organization, Rise Outreach. Tell us a little bit about what Rise Outreach is, and what's kind of the philosophy behind that.
So Rise itself is an LLC. So basically your product that you're paying for is choir. And we've had Rise since 2016. And over the pandemic, I always knew that I wanted to start a 501c3 branch, because I wanted to be able to offer scholarships to our graduating seniors. I wanted to be able to sponsor singers who couldn't potentially afford the whole tuition of, you're paying for choir in an LLC. And then looking around our community, there are so many places that don't have music as part of their day-to-day routines. There's schools without music, there's community programs without music, etc. So Rise Outreach was birthed out of the idea that we know that singing brings people together. Rise stands for revolutionizing and inspiring singing excellence. And I think that idea needs to be put out in other places. So we're revolutionizing and inspiring how these people at Hope Arbor experience music of their past and experience music of today. Oh, quick story. So right after the Elvis movie came out, because they love Elvis, Elvis and the Beach Boys, man, that group is just passionate about Elvis and the Beach Boys. So I played Hound Dog, because they just love dancing to it, and they do the little shake, and they freeze. Oh my gosh, so much fun. Anyway, so I played the Doja Cat remix of it, because I always have a this or that thing, offering them ideas for sparking conversations with grandkids or their kids or other people in their neighborhood. So I played the Doja Cat, and they learned how to go, "I'll get it."
No, my God.
And so the whole room's doing it. It was so awesome. Like, it's Hound Dog, right? And they're like, "It is Hound Dog." So the next week I came in, I said, "What was your favorite thing that you heard last week?" Kind of forcing them to try to use their memory. Sometimes that frustrates them, but sometimes they remember, and it's so exciting. So one girl goes, "I'll get it."
Oh my gosh.
I mean, so hard. Anyway, different. I digress. I come back. So Rise Outreach was started.
Digress as much as you want.
I know. I started Rise Outreach because you and I had written the book, and there was so much that's in the book about running 501c3s, and I had been so scared of doing it that after we wrote the book, I felt like I had all the tools necessary to do the 501c3 thing. So I started it. I have a great board. They are so supportive. And immediately we were contacted by a local school that does not have music in their school. It's a school with students with learning difficulties. That's why I had that tongue slip up earlier, because they don't have music. And I've brought music to them with the help of some of our RISE seniors. They come from school and they are able to do their service time, their service project and service hours at this school as we do the music to help them with sequencing and reading and problem solving and creating and all sorts of really cool socializing as well. And then Hope Arbor. So I think part of it started because we see there's a need in the community. But the other part is that RISE itself has always been created to fill a void of the young people as they grow up. I felt like when I left teaching and went to work for corporate America as a teacher trainer for a music curriculum, I didn't know how to eat and meet at the same time. Because we just learned to scarf our food down really fast as a teacher. How do you have a conversation and eat food at the same time? So there were all these things I wanted to teach my young people in my choir. How do you go to a social function and not be awkward? What questions do you ask so that you don't have to be the one driving the conversation? And so the tagline for RISE is sing, socialize, and serve. Because it's only when you get out and serve other communities and other places that you see other people's lived experiences. And there's so much power in giving back to your community and seeing that impact. And so RISE Outreach was birthed out of that idea to create a space where our seniors can come and do community service hours in a place where music is impacting the community for good.
That's amazing. So I love that. I know that serve has always been a part of RISE's DNA, even before RISE Outreach. You and I have talked about that for years now. But service in terms of, choral organizations on the whole, I'm not going to say is a new concept, but it's definitely one that's becoming a little bit more embraced. You see a lot of larger organizations starting to really notice that getting outside of the concert hall and using music in a different way that is not performance driven necessarily, where musical aesthetics, all that stuff is sort of secondary to the experience itself. We're doing it here in Pensacola. We have a special choir that's dedicated to doing that. We've been doing that for about as long as you've been doing that. And I know a lot of other organizations in other communities are starting to do stuff as well. And I think you and I can agree that this, and as your community just proved and showcased all across the city, that when choirs engage in this type of activity, there's a deeper relationship that forms almost, kind of just organically. People start to see you in a different light. Let's explore that a little bit. How can choirs who are maybe interested in starting some sort of service, not some deeper collaboration that gets outside the concert hall, what would you tell them?
I think, well, it's good that you bring this up, especially because this is an Advocacy and Collaboration curated episode. We immediately started talking. That's okay. We immediately started talking right after the video how service in and of itself is an aspect of collaboration, and then the stories become part of your advocacy. And that's not by any means why RISE Outreach was started or why we go to these places. We're not doing it for a grant. We're not doing it for the video clip. I mean, heavens, that was super scary for me right there. But I do think it's important that we look at service as a way to build deeper relationships because it gets you in a new place. People that might not, we talk about this a lot in the book, the people who may not have ever experienced choir or what it feels like to sing in a choir have experienced having the national anthem sung at some event. Like, it started back in 2016. We sang the national anthem for Girls on the Run 5K in town, and then a whole bunch of our singers ran with the Girls on the Run girls. That wasn't a super long-term relationship, but we served them by providing something they needed. They needed a national anthem song. And then we were able to meet the girls and run with them on this 5K and really invest in them. I just happened to have a choir where half my girls ran cross country. So it made sense at the time. So that was one year we did that service project. Another year we did like a show up at our rehearsal venue and did a cleanup around the venue. We picked up garbage, we pulled weeds, we just did things to help around that. There's been other years where we've supported, like showing up at a restaurant for someone's, like, when there's percentages that go to a something or other, like Habitat for Humanity does it all the time. They have percentage night at a local pizza place, and we'll show up and we'll do little small sings just to get more families showing up there. So it's not always something that's long term. It can be just a one and done thing, but it's not so much about we're showing up to sing and everyone's going to pay attention. It's more so about, let's entertain some people and use the power of entertainment to bring more awareness to something else. Or let's use our sweat equity and go put in some sweat equity. And a lot of times this would count as community service hours for the girls. It's all sorts of different ways. I mean, the cool part is it never has to look the same twice.
Right.
And I love that. And it's different for every community too.
Absolutely. But it is different in every community, but the situations you describe seem to have two common themes, and they're the ones that I observe here in Pensacola when we do these similar things as well. It's mutually beneficial, and it's about bringing a community together around music. And I think perhaps some of those listening, we talk about national anthems around the holidays. Choirs always get asked to sing carols at some event X, Y, and Z. And I think there's a really fine line between that concept of like exposure, like, oh, come and sing and you'll get this great exposure for your group. I kind of believe, like, I'm not against doing those types of things, but when people ask us to do that,
it's not mutually beneficial.
Right. And so all I do is I ask them to pay. So what are you going to pay us? There's the mutual benefit right there.
Yeah.
But that's such a surface level. The stuff that you're talking about has this very mutually beneficial relationship where each organization is benefiting something from it. And I think that's very intentional. So because I think for our singers, for any singer, we want to avoid tokenizing them, especially if we're talking about children, because it's very easy, because kids are cute and everybody loves watching kids sing, that we put them in intentional spaces where we're taking care of their growth and development because they see themselves in all this as well. That's such a really important element that Rise has been doing forever.
It's part of our DNA. I heard that conversation way back when. I don't even remember the panel. We were at a national ACDA, and someone on the panel said, you have to put it in your DNA if you want it to happen. So when we founded Rise, we put service in our DNA, and it's almost like the checkbox that ensures that we do something outside the box and collaborative every single year. And then Rise Outreach has just grown from doing that year after year, and now Rise Outreach exists for more long-term, more meaningful service opportunities. But something else, you sparked an idea in my head. As we're coming back into reality and we're getting past I don't know about you, but I still have a lot of singers that show up that have that, online learning mentality. Well, I'm here, I should just be good, instead of I'm here, I need to learn and then put in the work to get better. Seeing that from the young people all the way up through the college level, like phoning it in. And I think we're having to relearn how to show up and how to put in the work and how to put in the practice. And service is such a great way of seeing something done. I got that idea too from Rotary. I'm in our local Rotary around here, and just service above self is the mantra with Rotary. And you'll show up to there's this children's home, and they have their own garden. And once a year, all the Rotary Club goes and helps with setting up the garden for the next year. And you come in and it's a mess, and you leave a few hours later and it's beautiful. And I think seeing that, instead of instantaneous results, but something you worked for, but yet still get to see the result, is so important as we're working towards relearning how to put in the time and how not to phone it in.
Absolutely. You reminded me of our interview that we conducted with Cody Raven Morris for our book. She introduces the second section, which is about building your community. And in that interview, I'm sure we can link it to these podcast notes because it's on this podcast as well. She talks about having to go back to the basics. We were emerging from the pandemic, kind of getting back to somewhat normal at the time we conducted that interview. And she talked about having to go back to the basics, but then she stopped and said, not the basics of like teaching a rhythm or teaching a vowel. It's how do you greet people at the door? How do you literally back to being human with one another? And I
Hmm.
feel like, and I've, as we've talked with other choral leaders for the book, as we've talked at conferences, there's been a shift in choral music, and its larger purpose. I think we're seeing that in a lot of different ways. And I feel that some people who are holding on to that old identity, and I don't think it's even fair to define it because it's hard to define, but whatever we had before, people who are holding on are getting very frustrated that that's not there anymore. And I feel like one of the elements that can help people catch a new vision for choral music is this element of service. Um,
Hmm.
and not service in terms of like mission, that's really big in church culture, but just the concept of reframing music in a way that deepens community, that builds and deepens community. Um, and like we've talked about already, there are choirs that are doing it. You're doing it. What would you say to the choir director, to the music teacher who might be inspired to be like, okay, we haven't done this yet, but where do I start? Where do I start? What's the first step?
I think you have to start with your closest circle. Like, what is the closest thing to you? So, for example, I had that year that I had a ton of cross country people in my choir. It literally was over half my choir. So, I went looking for some type of other service minded organization that we could support in some way. And I called up their director. I said, how can we help you? And that's where the idea, it wasn't just like, hey, call, we'd like to sing the national anthem. And oh yeah, can we, it was a phone call. How, I have a lot of runners. How can we help you?
Mhm.
And that's where the conversation started. You can start within your school. Maybe there is something that needs, maybe your school needs the floors cleaned. I mean, it seems silly, but like there's so many actual get some sweat equity that can be done. But there could also be, maybe there's some type of event coming up that needs volunteers. Or maybe there's some type of thank you card that needs to be written, and you can all sit and do thank you card writing and delivering those thank you cards and saying thank you so much for supporting our school. I don't know what's going on in your individual community, but the easiest part is to look at what's in front of you and what makes the most sense, but don't do what you've always done. I think that's the big thing too. Choir has to have a new look. When we were kids, you sang in community choir forever. Like whatever you
Mhm.
started, you finished. I took piano lessons forever. There was
Yep.
no quitting and trying other things. And now that we're back to real life again, or whatever we're going to call it, people are being really, they're choosing what they're doing, and they're not always choosing choir. So that might mean we have to change what that looks like in our individual communities. And again, it might not be your community. Your community might have picked right back up and you're doing great, and this might just be a little sprinkle of awesome sauce that you can add to the amazing things that you're doing. But maybe you're still looking at, how do I rebuild? How do I recruit? How do I get people to want to be a part of our organization? And for us, having that service element has been a big piece of the puzzle. It's filling a void for a lot of need in our community, but also giving our singers something they can latch onto that means something to them.
Yeah, I think that the key that you said there is you have to, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but you have to embrace the possibility of something going totally outside of the norm, because we're on a different world now. And I had a conversation just yesterday about a project that we're working on, and I walked into the room, I said my piece, and I said, "What now?" Because I didn't know what the results of the conversation was going to be. We had an idea, we presented it, but now we have a partner agency that we're trying to get on board, and they had some ideas, and it turned into something completely different than we were expecting. Our first collaboration when I moved here in 2016 was with a community member came out and said, I want to introduce you to this person who's the CEO of the Art Gateway, which is an organization that works with adults with developmental disabilities. And I was like, cool, I don't know anything about that organization. But the first partnership we did, they just asked us to sing at a little tree lighting ceremony, and we worked with their residents, and we taught them Christmas carols with our singers, and we sang. I mean, I'd never done anything like that before. And on the surface, that seems so like, oh, obvious that that's what you should have done. But the impact on the singers was much more than I expected. And that's because we just embraced the possibility of what could happen. And I feel like
Mhm.
that's really great advice to anybody who's looking to get out of the box and maybe get
Yeah.
their music organizations to serve a little bit more.
If that idea is exciting to you, you should go back and listen to the episode by Evan Powers where he talked about the Songbird Project, because
Mm.
that really was what sparked a lot of the conversation that got us into Hope Arbor, where it's the idea that the singers learn all about what the residents or the participants are going through all different types of training, and then they come in and help them create playlists and music that will help them come to life. That's the ultimate goal here for us at Rise Outreach, is to eventually have some type of Songbirds project happening for our singers on the regular. But that's taking collaboration with the hospice group so we can get the proper training for our singers, with the school system so we can get our kids out of school when necessary to go do this. When is it all happening? Those pieces are still, those conversations are happening. It might not be visible for another year or so, but that doesn't mean that the seeds aren't planted.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening, within the context of this episode, there have been so many projects that have been listed, not just
Yeah.
from Emmy, but me, from all over the place. So if you're thinking that you are out of the box, that not out of the box, that you are a fish out of water here, there are choirs that are doing this. So you're going to join a great community,
Yeah.
and there's inspiration all around you. You just got to look for it. You
Right.
gotta look for it.
And if you're one of these groups that's already so invested in service, let's talk about it. Let's get it
Mhm.
out there. And I think that was something that you said to me. You were like, we've got to talk more about this. And I'm like, ah, that's enough. I've been on TV. We're done. That's enough publicity for me. And the thing is, we have to keep talking about it, because some people didn't hear it the first time, or someone might not be ready to hear it until later. And I mean, the cool thing that sparked from this, I just got an email yesterday from an organization in town that said, hey, saw you on the news. We give donations every month to an organization that we're really impressed with. Are you available for a phone call tomorrow? I mean,
Well,
out
how
of
about that?
nowhere. So the thing is, we have to keep talking about it, although it is so uncomfortable for many of us to be like toot our own horn. Ugh,
I do want to go
feels
on the record and
slimy.
say that Emmy was hesitant to do this.
This episode, yes.
Yes, I asked her, I said, we have to talk about this. She said, no, I don't want to talk about myself. And I told her, the key is, this is not talking about yourself to toot your own horn. These types of things in the music world are the things we have to be talking about. You know, we all put on great concerts. That's wonderful. And we can talk about our favorite pieces of music from day in and day out. But that isn't the depth of what our choirs do. And so that requires us as the leaders to get a little bit out of our comfort zone. If you're one that, like Emmy, who eats the humble pie every morning for breakfast, you have to get comfortable separating your ability to talk about the great things that you're doing with sort of that ego boost. It's not really about that. We have to talk about this kind of stuff because it's inspirational for others. We have to do it. So thanks for stepping out of the box, Emmy. And thanks for all the great work you're doing.
Well, thank you for asking. I think that we've really talked about a lot of different ideas here. We looked at what the video clip was about, and I'll make sure to include a link to the video clip to the news article in the episode notes. But scalability, where do you get started? Get started with what's right in front of you. Mm-hmm. Maybe not the easiest. I mean, if that gets you started, one step is one step forward. That's all that matters. But start with something that makes sense. Is there a certain group of people in your choir already or in your classroom already that would benefit from something? Is there a need in your school or your community? Call that person that you're thinking, there might be something there, and start the conversation. But here's the hard part. There were a lot of conversations that were had that didn't go anywhere.
Absolutely. I don't know about you, but I can see those just happening. I can realize I'm having a conversation and this isn't going to pan out, because it's usually when you're the one that's really invested and they're sort of like, okay, what do you need from us? Mm-hmm. I always feel like if something is really truly meant to be, there is energy and synergy and excitement on both sides. So as you're building these types of collaborations, those of you who are interested in building them, be wary of that mutually beneficial relationship that we talked about. That's really the important part here. That's how these things can just blossom into something great, and rather than just be a one-off type of thing.
Be resilient and persistent. Yes. Because Hope Arbor first reached out and said, hey, I think we'd like to do some music stuff. And I said, okay, let me brainstorm some things and I'll get back to you. So I brainstormed what would be beneficial for us and how I felt it would be beneficial for them. Sent the ideas, met with the director, and I got a big old stop sign. And they were like, Hold please while we go contact our board and make sure this is something that can be approved. And that stop sign lasted over a month. And through that stop sign, board members came back and said, well, how is this different? We already do music time with our visitors. Why is this something we need to invest in? And invest in is a loose word. That's a whole nother conversation. But why is this something that we like? They actually had stop signs and questions. I eventually had to have another meeting and another meeting. People kept being brought in. People wanted to make sure we wouldn't be stepping on the toes of the music minister at the church, even though it had absolutely nothing to do with them. Just covering all the bases. And had I not been able to just say, this isn't about me. They're not saying no to me. They're not saying no to what we're offering. There's just a lot of pieces to cover. And then in the end, oh my gosh, you can never take this away from me. It is one of my all-time favorite things I've ever done.
Well, that's because it's so great. And the impact on the participants, as you already described, is just, it's astronomical.
It's amazing.
It's so cool.
You can find out more. I'll link Hope Arbor too in the episode notes, because the pictures, and they invited me to be their guest speaker at their volunteer luncheon in December. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun.
Well, Emmy, thank you for opening yourself up and letting us know about Hope Arbor and all the wonderful things that Rise Outreach is doing. So as we wrap up,
oh, you have to ask the new end of episode questions, which don't have a name yet. Like, what do we call them? Like, obviously there's the warm-up questions, but what is this, like the cool down questions? We don't cool down in choir.
I don't know. I'm not the real host, so that's your job.
Oh, great. Okay. I need to come up with the end of show questions.
End of show questions, the wrap-up questions. So, what's the best or most recent book that you've ever read? That you're currently reading or have read?
So right now I'm currently reading The Brooklyn Bridge. It's a historical nonfiction. It's so good. It is talking all about life in New York and building the bridge. But what I love about it, I'm not very far. I'm only like a quarter of the way through, and it's one of those big fat ones. It's by David McCullough, such a great author. What I love is all of the struggles that they come through trying to build this bridge. It gets done, spoiler, but hearing everything that happened as they were trying to be innovative, it's just been a very inspiring book, The Brooklyn Bridge.
Fun fact, the precursor to the Brooklyn Bridge, The Test, is in Cincinnati.
I know. They went on a trip to Cincinnati, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to see that at Nationals.
Yes. Okay, so who or what is mattering or inspiring to you right now? And you can't say Hope Arbor.
How did you know I was going to say Hope Arbor?
Because we just talked about it for like 45 minutes.
Well, I really am inspired by all of our teacher friends that have gone back to school this week and are doing it with a big smile on their face. It's tough to get back the 1st of January, and especially, I mean, I'm getting over an upper respiratory infection and bronchitis, and man, it's been the best start to a new year. But I'm seeing all these teachers showing up, smiling, and I just left Rock Hill School District up in South Carolina a couple days ago for a PD day. And just to see them so excited to get back in the classroom teaching. Like, we started the day and everyone's like, I'm kind of excited. And at the end, they're like, I can't wait to do this or that. And so I'm really inspired by all the teachers out there doing their thing.
That's amazing. What organization or agency matters to you right now? Or, someone you'd like to illuminate?
Rise Outreach.
Okay. You can do that, because I just said we have to advocate for ourselves. I do have to advocate.
Rise Outreach is a 501c3. It has been a really awesome learning opportunity, as I am the executive/artistic director of a nonprofit. I never in a million bajillion years thought I would ever say that. And thanks. Learning to work with a board and how to manage all the finances. And it has been such a cool learning experience. And so I am really proud of it, and I would love to inspire anyone else that has an idea. You can do it. You can make your own organization. It's a lot of steps and it's a lot of work, but it is totally worth it.
You can do it. And finally, what is the thing that matters the most to you that you want to just send out into the world today?
I want to sing the little line of that song one more time. Oh, get it. Just go get it. Whatever it is you want, go get it. Get it done, ask for help, start the conversation. I'll get it. That's it.
I love it. Well, thank you all for listening. Again, I am your co-host with the most, Alex Gartner, here today with your real host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, talking about the amazing work that she is doing in Savannah with Rise Chorales and Rise Outreach. If you were not inspired today, get out from under the rock and go do something in your community, because you can make a difference.
I'll get it. In case no one has told you today. We all know that you matter. We know that music matters, especially the way that music gives us opportunities to do service and give back to our communities in a new way of collaborating and advocating for our organizations. And I'll see you next time on the Music and Matters podcast.